Now, let's talk a little bit further about these strategies that emerged out of the reform movement number 1 to increase the recruitment and retention of minorities and women. The majority of engineering colleges and universities in the country have indeed established minority engineering programs, which are designed to improve the statistical levels of recruitment and retention of minority and women students. The idea is that offering support programs that go fit around engineering education, may increase the rates of recruitment and retention. But this presents a theoretical problem for engineers and engineering students. And I want to take some time to flesh out this theoretical problem. The dominant model of success in engineering and engineering problem solving is success in this math-based, science-based problem-solving activity, which we know as given, find, solution. As engineering students, you are challenged to demonstrate that you can master this method of problem solving. And the dominant model suggests that your success in engineering is going to depend upon your capabilities as an individual. That is, people come and stay because they're good, and they leave because they're not good, or somehow they can't hack it. Well, how then are engineering faculty and administrators to explain the phenomenon of underrepresentation? According to the dominant model, it must be because somehow women and minorities are less capable, maybe biologically, or less suited for engineering than white males in terms of this dominant image. But the only source of support for this argument lies in cultural stereotypes, stereotypes that somehow would suggest that women and minorities are biologically less suited. So what's going on here? In a way, the dominant model of hacking it in engineering programs prevents engineers from being able to explain the problem, and indeed inhibits, throws up a barrier and offers a framework of interpretation that undercuts legitimacy for minority engineering programs. And it puts those engineers who are trying to figure out ways of increasing representation in a rather difficult position. So, let's try and compare two different interpretations of minority engineering programs side by side. And I do this to ask you to make visible to yourself your own stance on an issue such as this one, to figure out how your perspective is located in relationship to other perspectives, and in part to let you know that there are more than one perspective at play here. Let us start with perspective, what I'm going to call perspective S, where S stands for Sununu. From the point of view of perspective S, any kind of special assistance offered to anyone in engineering education is fundamentally inappropriate, because as you go through engineering, you deal with challenges. Everybody deals with the same challenges. Everybody has to solve the same problems. Everyone has to figure out how to deal with the fact that the sum of the forces equals 0. If you provide any kind of special assistance in the form of support programs, mentoring programs, places to study, and the like, from this perspective, you're giving some people assistance and not others. And yet, all people, all engineering students, are the same. That is the key dominant image here, the key assumption. All people are the same. Well, let's take a look at the challenge that one faces as an engineering student. What does it take to become a good engineering problem solver? Let me ask you quickly, how many of you know someone who was transferred out of medical school or law school, or flunked out of medical school or law school? some of you, when I asked this in class, of a class of 300, I had about 8 or 9 who knew someone who transferred out or flunked out of one of those two. Note that the big challenge in medical school and law school is getting in. Can you pass the MCATs? Can you pass the LSATs? Can you get through the interview? Can you make it into the school? Once you're in, they make sure you get out for the most part. Well, how many of you know someone who has transferred out of engineering? When I asked that in class, about 80% raised their hands. So out of a class of 300, 240 will raise their hands. The point being that when you're admitted to engineering education, unlike medicine and law, it's just the beginning. You've been granted the ability to sit and struggle. You've been allowed to start, but you haven't yet proven anything. So what do you have to be a good engineer? And what kind of a person does it take? When I ask this in class, the words that come out include disciplined. You have to be immensely disciplined. Remember the quote from the beginning of the course from the associate dean who said at orientation, engineering students have to learn how to have fun efficiently. You must be disciplined. Well, you must be rational. Remember Sununu. To be an engineer, you have to be rational, and good engineers are rational. In a way, you have to prove yourself. You have to demonstrate over and over again that you have what it takes. And something that I argue in this class, that we explore in this class, is that in learning engineering, and learning to be a good engineering problem solver, in a way you learn to accept the invisibility of yourself. To be a good problem solver, you have to learn how to just do the problems. Keep yourself out of it. Demonstrate that you can master the problems and keep personal stuff somewhere else. That's in contrast with, say, problem solving in physics, where physicists are competing with one another to demonstrate they have the essence, the Einstein-like essence of creativity, of creative genius that will enable them to come up with the new innovation, the new concept, the new physics theory. In engineering, we want to know what's on the test. We want to know what we have to know to solve the problem correctly, and we accept, as a result, a kind of invisibility of the self. If I ask you to name 10 engineers, how long would it take you to come up with 10? Name one engineer. In engineering, we expect that we're going to be somehow working in the middle. And accepting the invisibility of the self, accepting that one is likely to be invisible, comes as part of the challenge in learning engineering education. And in perspective S, Sununu, everyone faces this sort of a challenge, because all students are the same. Well, now let's examine a different perspective. We'll call it perspective W, where W here stands for Watford, the last name of Virginia Tech's Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Director of the Minority Engineering Programs, the Office of Minority Engineering Programs, Dr. Bevlee Watford, who an undergraduate student of Virginia Tech, who went on to graduate degrees and PhD in mining engineering, and came back in the early 1990s to join the faculty at Virginia Tech, working under Reform Movement number 1. From this point of view, minority engineering programs are essential. In this perspective, in contrast with the first, people are not the same. People are different from one another in systematic ways. There's a different dominant image here. Now let's try and analyze these differences in the terms that we've been using in the course, the analysis of images. Let's take a look at some cultural stereotypes. Most of you are men. Help me understand the stereotypic man. In class, I say, all right, all the women in the class, tell me, what's a real man? Help me identify the key features that define the real man in American society today. And I start to write things down on the blackboard. And the words that come out include such things as strong. A real man is strong. A real man is virile. A real man is a successful provider. Somehow he takes responsibility, suggesting that he's disciplined. Some will joke and say, well, the real man is egotistical. The question is, now, are all men this way? Are all men strong, virile, disciplined, and indeed rational? Well, no. We say no. This is something to which men aspire. The gender stereotype that men face is built around the image of proving ourselves. Men have to prove themselves. Now, men who prove themselves know that they can pretty much go anywhere. But the challenge of proving themselves is always there. It never goes away. Now, do you notice any parallels here? Let's say one is a man and one is an engineering student. One is challenged by the stereotypic man, challenged to prove oneself, and one is challenged by the image of what it means to be a good engineer. One is challenged to prove oneself. The challenges one feels as an engineering student, arguably, are not that different from what the challenge one feels as a man. In some sense, engineering education presents men with something that they have experienced most of their lives, and so it doesn't feel all that different. What does surprise men, especially those who come in wanting to be big shots, wanting to make a difference in the world through technology, somehow wanting to be visible, wanting to be famous, wanting to make a lot of money, is the challenge of invisibility, the challenge to keep yourself out of your work. And that could be a shock and cause difficulties for people as they realize, in order to get where I want to go, I have to go through a here, which is solving thousands of engineering problems. But arguably, there's something of a match. Well, let's say I'm a woman. What is the stereotypic woman? Now, we're not talking about any real people here, just as we weren't talking about any real men. We're only talking about the images, about the stereotype. What is a good woman in this country, in this place? Well, when I ask this in class, what comes out are words like caretaker. She's a caretaker. She's somehow a social mediator. She has good social skills. She's maternal. She's nurturing. And most importantly, she's emotional. Yes, women are biologically emotional. Right? Well, now, what if one is also challenged by engineering? Let's say I'm a woman, and I'm challenged by this image of the emotional person. I'm told I'm biologically emotional. And I'm joining this curriculum, which challenges me to be rational. Wait a minute. From one point of view, if I'm biologically emotional, I am too emotional for engineering. Indeed, I shouldn't be in engineering. Women should not be in engineering because women are too emotional. In fact, women are too emotional to be in public life. Women should be kept at home. Women should be kept in the private sphere. Women should not be allowed in public. Well, let's say I don't accept that. Let's say I'm a woman who thinks this stereotype is maybe it's flawed in some way, and I want to resist it. Notice, by the way, that the stereotype, by suggesting that women should stay at home, is challenging women to accept invisibility, not be in public, to stay out of prominent spaces. Well, let's say I'm a woman who resists this. And I want in my life to challenge this. Sorry, it's just wrong. So I enter engineering, because engineering is a pathway to some cultural prominence, it seems to me. I enter engineering, I learn engineering problem solving, and I'm challenged to be rational. Okay, no problem. I'm challenged to keep myself out of my work. I'm challenged to keep myself invisible. That's different from just being challenged to prove myself. I mean, what I have to do is to show that I'm not determined by my biology, which is telling me to be emotional. It's a different challenge than men face. So what do I do? Well, in studying this some, we've identified some different patterns. And you can tell me whether or not these patterns work for you and whether there might be others. One reaction we see from women students is the following. I am not a woman engineer. I am an engineer who happens to be a woman. So I just keep myself out of it. This stereotype that tells me I'm emotional is just baloney. So forget it. I am a damn good engineer, and I'll kick your butt. And there are a lot of women engineers, and probably all women engineers, that adopt this stance at least at some points. So they, in a way, accept the demand for the invisibility of the self in the work by saying, I'm an engineer, and I just happen to be female. That's a reasonable response, and one way for women to make their way in this world of engineering. Another response is to say, I am a woman engineer, and I'm going to come in here and through my very presence change things. Now, from this point of view, women who adopt this stance are recognizing that in a funny sort of way, the challenge to be and keep oneself invisible, I mean, is a difficult, it's still there, and one has to practice it in one's work. But because demographically there are relatively few women, one still gets to be kind of visible. So by asserting I'm a woman engineer, in a way I'm recognizing that I'm going to be visible in this group of men. I have a problem. My problem is how to live as a visible person while still practicing engineering properly that tells me to keep myself out of my work. And that can be a challenge, but it's one I'll accept. Another approach is to say, look, I'm resisting this stereotype. My life is about resisting this stereotype. I want to be visible. Why should I go into a field that is telling me I must keep myself invisible? That's what the stereotype is telling me. Now, I'm not saying that people reason in exactly these terms, but I am suggesting that the sense that some people might feel that they don't fit in engineering might be connected to the interaction of these images, the interaction of the challenges from these images. And so for such people, in the third case, forget it. I'm out of here. I'm going somewhere where I can fit. Another, now let's get to the more difficult case, especially in the United States, the issue of race. What is the stereotypic black person or Hispanic? Remember that the dominant image of the engineer is a disciplined person. Well, I heard a while back on NPR, National Public Radio, a story about how an office building in one of the major cities in the Midwest had banned rap music. Like, you could play other kinds of music, but not rap music. Rap music was judged to be fundamentally undisciplined and fundamentally undermining discipline in the workplace. There's a variety of means through which we could start to evoke and describe stereotypes that apply to the black person, not specific people, we're talking about the image, or Hispanics. I mean, such a person is characterized as undisciplined, biologically, perhaps even lazy, biologically. Well, from the point of view of this stereotype, black people and Hispanics are inappropriate for engineering just like women. Black people and Hispanics should stay out of public life. They're undisciplined. They can never be rational because they're fundamentally inappropriate. Well, in a way, the same three alternatives get faced. The experiences that black people have in relationship to the stereotype and in relationship to engineering have some significant parallels with the experiences of women, and in contrast with white males. One reaction that we've seen is to say, look, I am not a black engineer. I'm an engineer who happens to be black. And so accept the challenge of invisibility and work as an engineer and make a difference by accepting that challenge in engineering and moving into the field and serving as a role model in engineering terms. A second approach is to say, wait a minute, I am a black engineer. And through my presence and through my active work, I'm going to try and make a difference. Knowing that I'm going to be visible, I have a problem of being visible while also being challenged to keep myself out of my work. It's a bit of a problem for me, but I'll somehow manage it. And the third is to say, wait a minute, there's this stupid stereotype about black people that I'm resisting, and it's challenging me to be invisible. And I join this field that's challenging me to be invisible. I'm sorry, it doesn't feel right. I don't feel that I fit here. I think I'm going to go somewhere else. So from this second point of view, from this point of view, this perspective W for Watford, we might be able to account for the different retention rates of people in engineering according to gender and according to race. The second person, that doesn't depend upon claiming that people are biologically unsound or inappropriate in one way or another. So we have two positions. Engineering knowledge expects all students to be the same. So the dominant image in engineering is in a way allied with perspective S. It founds perspective S. All students are the same. But engineering problems don't solve themselves. People solve engineering problems. And so when you start to think about engineering problem solving in relationship to people, you invoke other dimensions about people, other images that affect people. And when you start to invoke those other images, then perspective W may gain some plausibility, which holds that people are different from one another. From this point of view, minority engineering programs doesn't give unfair assistance to some people. Rather, it provides support in a way that that may be necessary to achieve a level playing field so that people in engineering education can, in a way, compete on an even keel. Where do you stand? That's your business. And how you adopt a perspective is your business. What I care about is that if you hold a position, I want you to be able to articulate it. I want you to be able to explore the dominant images that shape it. And I want you to be able at least to recognize that there are positions out there that disagree with you, so that you can learn to live in a world where there's more than one perspective. Now, reform movement number one led to the founding of massive engineering coalitions in the United States, funded by the National Science Foundation. Basically, hundreds of millions of dollars put into colleges of engineering to initially address the problem of numbers, and then to address the problem that is part of reform movement number two. These are worth studying and worth exploring. They've produced significant innovations. Their overall impact, their overall effect in transforming engineering education is still an open question in the late 1990s.